بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Today inshallah we shall discuss part 1 on Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha was the final wife which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam married, and this marriage took place in the 7th year of Hijrah. Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha belonged to a very noble lineage. She was among the Quraysh tribe and the Sadat. Her father was Harith and her mother was Hind bin Auf. Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha's sisters were those sisters whom Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said about akhawatun mu'minat. These are believing sisters. And among these believing sisters, one was Maymunah bint al-Harith. Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala had several sisters. Some full sisters and some half sisters. So among her sisters were Lubabatul Kubra, who was the wife of Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So in other words, Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala was the aunt of Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. In the same manner, she was the aunt of Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, because Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu anhu's mother, her name was Asma bint al-Harith. So she was the other sister of Maymunah bint al-Harith. And Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu anhu's father's name was Walid bin Mughira. So Walid bin Mughira's wife was Asma bint al-Harith, who was a sister of Maymunah bint al-Harith. It is said in respect to the mother of Maymunah bint al-Harith, Hind bin Auf, akramu ajuzin fil arad asharan. She's among the most fortunate mother-in-laws on the face of this earth, because she was a mother-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Likewise, she was a mother-in-law of Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. She was a mother-in-law of Ali radiyallahu anhu. She was a mother-in-law of Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. She was a mother-in-law of Ja'far bin Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. She was a mother-in-law of Hamza radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu anha's half-sister. Her name was Asma bint Umays. So Asma bint Umays's first marriage was with Ja'far bin Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. After his martyrdom, Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu married her. And after his death, Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu married Asma bint Umays radiyallahu ta'ala anha. So Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha belonged to a very noble lineage. Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu anhu, who was her nephew, would boast about this, and he would look for opportunities to spend time at her house on those days when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's turn with Maymunah radiyallahu anhu was designated. He would spend or try to spend that time at her house So he could observe Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's actions in respect to his household. So his household actions and his household a'mal. Nonetheless, Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu anhu's first husband, his name was Mas'ud bin Udawa al-Thaqafi. For whatever reason, the marriage didn't work out and separation occurred. The second husband was Abu Ruham. And after Abu Ruham's death, again she became a widow. And Maymunah bint al-Harith's sister, Lubabatul Kubra, whose nickname was Fadl, because she was the mother of Fadl bin Abbas, who was a brother of Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So Lubabatul Kubra was her sister, and she had informed her husband Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala about the situation. So Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala approached Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So keep in mind, Abbas radiyallahu anhu, he was an uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he approached Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and he mentioned the situation. And he gave a suggestion that if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam desires to marry her, he may do so. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam accepted his suggestion, and he made Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala his agent and proxy to perform the nikah and marriage on his behalf. Nonetheless, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he had left Medina Munawwara to Makkah Mukarramah for the purpose of performing Umrah al-Qadha, which is known as a famous compensatory Umrah, which was supposed to be performed in the previous year and was not performed, which resulted in Sulh Hudaybiyah, the peace treaty of Hudaybiyah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was in the state of ihram when the marriage was performed. However, when one is in the state of ihram, to engage in any sexual engagements is not allowed for one who is in this state and condition. So after performing the Umrah rites and now releasing himself sallallahu alayhi wasallam from the state of ihram, the marriage had already been performed and conducted. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was approached by Huwayta bin Abdul Uzza, who had informed Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that the agreement for you and your companions to reside in Makkah Mukarramah was for 3 days. Those 3 days have now expired. They have now finished. So you must leave. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he had put a request forward that I have married one of your women from your tribe, the Quraysh tribe. So if you allow me 1 or 2 more days, I would like to include you in the marriage banquet. So Huwayta bin Abdul Uzza replied by saying that we are not in need of your banquet. You must leave and depart right now. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, just on a side note, look how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was treated by those people who he grew up with. And imagine what he was going through especially when he had to leave his home and native land. Nonetheless, because there was a agreement in place, and that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would never ever go against his agreement, he and the companions left. And they left and they went to a place called Sadif, which is approximately 10 to 15 miles from Makkah Mukarramah. And that's where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent the night with Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And that's when the marriage banquet took place. Now keep in mind, this is a very historical place, because the place of Sadif is a place where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent his wedding night with Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And this is the same place where, when Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala was 81, according to one narration, and according to another narration, 85, this is the same place that she was brought and she then passed away. I'll just mention the incident now rather than afterwards in respect to her death. So Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha was traveling to perform Hajj. And after performing Hajj, she fell sick. So she remembered a saying of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to me that you will not pass away in Makkah Mukarramah. So it was her desire that she made this plea and request to her nephews who accompanied her, that take me out from Makkah Mukarramah. And she was brought to the place of Sadif and to the same tree whereby Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent the night with her. And that was a place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destined for her to depart from this temporary abode and temporary world. So Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha was a very pious lady. Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she would mention, إِنَّهَا كَانَتْ مَنْ أَتْقَانَا وَأَوْصَلَنَا لِلرَّحِمِ. That Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha is the most pious among the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she is the most adherent to maintaining ties of kinship with family. Now, for one wife to praise another wife, this is a very great achievement. And this is not an easy task. For Aisha radiyallahu anha to say this says and speaks a lot about how big hearts they had, and how much fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala they had, and how they would put everything in its place, and they would not allow their emotions to supersede the facts. So nonetheless, Aisha radiyallahu anha praised Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala that she was among the most muttaqi, the most God-fearing, among the most pious, among the most righteous amongst all of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted her many qualities. And quality number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted her tafaqquh fi din. Tafaqquh fi din means correct and sound understanding of Islamic knowledge. According to one narration, she narrated 76 ahadith, and according to another narration, she narrated 46 ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Quality number 2, she had this passion and zeal to not only learn the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but to propagate and to spread his teachings far and wide. And her nephew Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala, who was known as Ra's al-Mufassirin, the leader of the Mufassirin, he had a special connection with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there were many incidents where Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu would go and benefit from his aunt Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala, so he could acquire knowledge in respect to those things which were not normally manifested outside one's household. So once Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he came with disheveled hair in front of Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And Maymunah asked him radiyallahu ta'ala anha, what has happened to your hair? Why are you in this condition? So he said that my wife has fallen ill. And normally my wife, she is the one who looks after me. Looks after me, meaning looks after my hair. So Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she replied by saying that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would lie down, place his head in our lap, and recite the Quran. And thereafter she said, "O my beloved son, your wife may be sick, but your hand is not sick," meaning that you have the power to look after yourself. So you should look after yourself. On another occasion, Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala sent one of her bondswomen to Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala's house. And she noticed that Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala and his wife, their bedding was separated. So when she came home, she informed Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, and Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha asked Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu anhu in respect to the separation of bedding, as she most likely probably have believed that maybe there was a dispute among husband and wife. That's why the bedding was separate. So Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that she was in the state of menstruation. Therefore, our bedding is separate. So Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu anha replied by saying that when this would happen with the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would never ever separate his bedding, rather he would sleep with his wives. Therefore, let Abdullah bin Abbas understand that we should not sway and move away from the path and the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Subhanallah. Look at Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu anha's passion and her zeal for spreading the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, these are those things which only one's wife is able to inform others of. So she's counseling her nephew Abdullah bin Abbas, who is Ra's al-Mufassirin, the leader of the commentators of the Quran, the understanding which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu anhu in respect to the Quran. That understanding was seldomly granted to others. Nonetheless, Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha made this statement to Abdullah bin Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. On another occasion, there was a lady who made a vow that if this lady was sick, so she made this vow that if I am cured by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I will travel to Bayt al-Maqdis and I will perform salah therein. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted her cure, she started making preparations for the travel of Bayt al-Maqdis. And she was going around making salam with her fellow companions. When she made salam with Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, Maymunah radiyallahu anha immediately told her, why don't you pray salah in Masjid al-Nabawi? Because the reward of performing one salah in Masjid al-Nabawi, according to one narration, is 1,000 times more than performing reward in any other masjid. And according to another narration, we find the words 50,000 times more reward. So in Masjid al-Haram, the reward is 100,000 times for each salah. And in Masjid al-Nabawi, the reward, according to one narration, is 50,000. And according to another narration, is 1,000 times more. So Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha told this lady, why do you need to travel so far? Just perform salah in Masjid al-Nabawi. Again, look at her zeal and passion to follow the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On another occasion, Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha would take out loans. She would take out debts. And she would immediately pay these debts off. So once she took out debts, she took out loans, and it was said to her that, why are you taking out debts? So she said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has once mentioned that if a person takes out loans, if a person takes out debts with the intention of genuinely paying back those debts, then addallahu anhu, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall pay those loans, pay those debts off on his behalf or her behalf. Again, look at her conviction in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On another occasion, Maymunah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she had a slave girl who she released. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to her that instead of setting her free, instead of releasing her, had you gifted her and had you given her to your uncle, in other words, your relatives, this would have brought more reward, as this also constitutes sila rahmi, maintaining good ties of kinship. So these were just some very noble characteristics and some background information on Maymunah bint al-Harith radiyallahu ta'ala anha. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to bring these beautiful qualities into our lives, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept their worship and their time with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made their time, their worship, their entire lives lessons for the entire ummah. So although this was part one, this talk was converted into two parts, meaning this will be part one and part two. So there will be no separate part two. Alhamdulillah, our series on the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, the mothers of the believers series, has now come to its completion, and now it's come to its end. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring these beautiful characteristics in the lives of all of our mothers. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to live our lives in accordance to the wishes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Jazakum Allah khair.